During what seemed like a routine landlord-tenant dispute in Judge Judy's courtroom, an entitled woman named Karen made a decision that would change everything. But what she didn't know was that Judge Judy had already uncovered a dark secret about her past, something that would expose her as a serial scammer who had destroyed multiple landlords' lives. The moment Karen opened her mouth to interrupt, the courtroom erupted into chaos. She refused to follow basic rules, screamed at the judge, and even tried to physically leave mid-trial. The bailiff stood frozen. The plaintiff gasped. Audience members couldn't believe what they were witnessing. But here's what nobody expected. Judge Judy had been waiting for someone exactly like Karen to walk into her courtroom. Why did this Karen actually believe she could outsmart America's toughest judge? What devastating evidence was Judge Judy hiding that would completely destroy Karen's lies? The entire meltdown was caught on camera, and when the truth finally came out, it divided viewers across the nation. Some called it the greatest takedown in courtroom history. Others said Judge Judy went too far. But one thing is certain. What happens next will restore your faith in justice and leave you absolutely speechless. If you love seeing entitled people get exactly what they deserve, smash that like button right now, and hit subscribe because we're breaking down the most satisfying courtroom justice moments you need to see. Turn on notifications so you never miss when karma strikes. Now let's get into what really happened when this Karen met her match. It was supposed to be a simple landlord-tenant dispute. Judge Judy had presided over thousands of cases exactly like this one. The courtroom was quiet, orderly, and professional. On one side sat Margaret Chen, a soft-spoken 67-year-old widow who had worked as a nurse for 40 years before retiring. She had rented out her basement apartment in good faith, believing in giving people second chances. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a folder filled with evidence. Her eyes red from sleepless nights worrying about her financial security. On the other side sat 42-year-old Deborah Whitmore, the Karen who would soon become infamous. Arms crossed, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, she was already rolling her eyes during the opening statements. Margaret was suing for $5,000 in unpaid rent and property damage, money she desperately needed to cover her late husband's medical bills. But from the very first moment, Karen's attitude screamed entitlement. She sighed loudly every time Margaret spoke. She checked her phone repeatedly, the bright screen glowing in the dim courtroom. She leaned over to whisper to her friends sitting in the gallery, both of them giggling like teenagers in detention. Judge Judy's sharp eyes caught everything. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Ms. Whitmore, put the phone away. This is a courtroom, not your living room. Karen responded with an exaggerated eye roll, letting out a dramatic sigh before muttering, whatever, under her breath. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into that legendary stare. The bailiff straightened his posture, hand instinctively moving closer to his side. Every person in that courtroom could feel it. Something was about to go very, very wrong for Karen. This wasn't just about $5,000 anymore. This was about respect, accountability, and whether entitled behavior would finally face consequences in Judge Judy's courtroom. Margaret began explaining her case, her voice shaking slightly. Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore stopped paying rent after just 3 months. I tried to work with her, I gave her extensions, but suddenly Karen exploded from her seat. That's a lie. You're a liar! The courtroom went silent. Judge Judy's head snapped toward Karen, eyes blazing. Excuse me? Did I ask you to speak? Karen threw her hands up. I have a right to defend myself. Judge Judy leaned forward, voice sharp as glass. You'll have your turn. Sit down and be quiet. Karen dropped back into her chair but continued muttering loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is such bullshit. Can't believe this. Margaret, hands trembling, pulled out photographs, holes punched in drywall, broken cabinet doors hanging by single hinges, carpet stained beyond recognition. Karen shot up again like a rocket. Those photos are fake. She probably did that herself to frame me. The audience gasped collectively. Judge Judy's voice could cut steel. Ms. Whitmore, if you interrupt one more time, you're going to regret it. Karen smirked, crossing her arms defiantly. Oh, please, what are you going to do? The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear breathing. Judge Judy leaned forward slowly, deliberately. Try me. For a moment, Karen actually looked nervous. When it was finally Karen's turn to speak, she immediately played the victim card. I'm a single mother. Do you know how hard it is? Judge Judy didn't miss a beat. Do you have children living with you? Karen hesitated. Well, no, they're with their father, but... So you're not actively raising children? Karen's face reddened. That's not the point. You're attacking me because you hate women who stand up for themselves. She dabbed at her eyes with theatrical fake tears, but her voice remained aggressive and argumentative. Then came the moment that shocked everyone. Karen's phone rang, the annoying ringtone echoing through the courtroom. And she actually answered it. Hello? Yeah, I'm in court right now dealing with this ridiculous... Judge Judy's voice boomed. Bailiff! Take that phone. Karen clutched it to her chest. You can't take my property. I know my rights. The bailiff approached and Karen actually tried to hide the phone behind her back like a child. When he finally wrestled it away, she screamed, This is theft! I'm calling the police. Judge Judy's response was ice cold. You're in court. With an officer. Think about that. As Judge Judy began citing evidence against her, Karen completely lost control. This is rigged. You're biased. You're racist. Sexist. You probably hate people like me. She started listing every possible discrimination claim she could think of. I want a different judge. This is unfair. I'm being persecuted. She began pacing wildly, gesturing with her hands, her voice rising to a near shriek. Audience members exchanged shocked glances. Margaret sat frozen, hand over her mouth. The bailiff stepped closer, ready to intervene. And Judge Judy? She sat perfectly still, fingers steepled, letting Karen dig her own grave deeper with every word. The explosion was complete, and the shutdown was about to begin. After Karen's explosive tirade, Judge Judy did something completely unexpected. She said nothing. Not a single word. She just sat there staring at Karen with that legendary look that had made her a cultural icon. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The silence was suffocating. Karen's wild gesturing slowed, then stopped. Her mouth closed. For the first time since entering that courtroom, actual fear flickered across her face. The audience didn't dare breathe. Margaret sat frozen, watching. Finally, Judge Judy spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you finished? Karen swallowed hard and nodded weakly. Judge Judy reached across her desk and picked up the lease agreement, holding it between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. Ms. Whitmore, is this your signature? Karen glanced at it nervously. Yes, but yes or no? Judge Judy's tone left no room for elaboration. Karen's voice cracked. Yes. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. And did you read this lease before you signed it? Karen shifted in her seat. Well, I skimmed it, but you skimmed it. Judge Judy let that hang in the air. So you signed a legal document without reading it and now you want sympathy? Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Judge Judy raised one finger. That was rhetorical. Be quiet. Then Judge Judy reached for another stack of papers, these ones clipped together with a yellow tab. Karen's eyes widened when she saw them. Bank statements, subpoenaed directly from her bank. You claim you couldn't afford rent, is that correct? Judge Judy asked, flipping through the pages. Karen tried to sound confident. That's right, I was struggling financially and then explain these charges. Judge Judy began reading, her voice dripping with contempt. $400 at Element Spa and Salon, $350 for concert tickets to see Beyoncé, $200 at Diamond Nails, $180 at an upscale restaurant, another $200 at Nordstrom. She looked up. All of these charges occurred during the same 3-month period when you owed Mrs. Chen $1,500 in rent. Karen's face turned bright red. I deserve to have a life. I can't just sit at home being miserable. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Judge Judy's response was devastating. Not with someone else's money, you don't. The audience murmured in agreement, several people nodding. One woman whispered amen loud enough to be heard. Karen looked around wildly, realizing the room had turned completely against her. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking slightly. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of decades on the bench. Let me tell you something about being an adult, Ms. Whitmore. Something you clearly never learned. She paused, letting every word sink in. You don't get to live rent-free because you feel entitled to luxuries. You don't get to destroy someone's property and then blame them for documenting the damage. You don't get to sign legal contracts and then pretend you didn't understand them. And you certainly don't get to act like a spoiled, entitled child in my courtroom. Each sentence landed like a hammer blow. Karen's face went from red to pale. Her hands gripped the edge of the defendant's table. She was finally realizing just how badly she was losing. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. She pulled out yet another folder, this one thicker than the others. Ms. Whitmore, this is your 3rd eviction in 5 years. Karen's eyes went wide with shock. How did you— I do my homework. Judge Judy interrupted, her voice sharp. Unlike you. She opened the folder, revealing court documents from 2 previous cases. May 2019, you were evicted from an apartment in Santa Monica. You sued that landlord too, claiming uninhabitable conditions. You lost. September 2021, evicted from a condo in Pasadena. Again, you sued, claiming discrimination. You lost again. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen, her gaze piercing. You have a pattern, Ms. Whitmore. And that pattern is taking advantage of kind people, living rent-free for as long as possible, destroying their property, and then playing the victim when you're held accountable. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, Her friend in the gallery covered her face with her hands. Margaret sat motionless, barely daring to believe what she was hearing. Then Judge Judy did something beautiful. She turned to Margaret and her entire demeanor softened. Her voice became warm, almost gentle. "Mrs. Chen, I want you to hear this clearly. You did nothing wrong." Margaret's eyes immediately filled with tears. "You were generous. You were patient. You were respectful. You gave this woman chance after chance, and she took advantage of your kindness at every turn." A tear rolled down Margaret's cheek. Judge Judy continued, "Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They see a gentle person and think they've found an easy target." She glanced at Karen with contempt before returning her gaze to Margaret. "You're about to see that's not the case here." Judge Judy reached for her gavel. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Karen's hands were shaking. Margaret gripped her folder tightly. The bailiff stood at attention. Everyone knew what was coming. The moment of justice was finally here. Karen could feel the walls closing in. She could see it in every face around her. The audience staring with contempt. Margaret sitting taller, more confident. The bailiff watching her every move. And Judge Judy, calm and unmoved, ready to deliver the verdict that would change everything. Sensing she had already lost, Karen made one final desperate decision. She went nuclear. "You know what?" Karen's voice cracked as she stood up, pointing at Judge Judy. "I don't even care about your judgment." The courtroom gasped. Even Judge Judy's eyebrows raised slightly. Karen was spiraling now, completely out of control. "I wasn't going to pay anyway. I never planned to pay." The audience erupted in shocked murmurs. She had just admitted on camera, in front of everyone, that she had never intended to honor her obligation. Karen's face twisted with rage. "You think you're so high and mighty with your TV show and your millions of dollars? You don't know what it's like to struggle." Judge Judy raised one eyebrow, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Keep talking. You're making my job easier," but Karen couldn't stop herself. The dam had broken. "This whole system is rigged against people like me. You're all just..." She gestured wildly at the courtroom. "I don't have to listen to this. I'm leaving." And then she actually did it. Karen turned on her heel and started marching toward the exit. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps toward the door. The audience sat frozen in disbelief. Was she really trying to walk out of Judge Judy's courtroom mid-trial? Judge Judy's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Bailiff, 1 word. That's all it took." The bailiff moved with surprising speed, positioning himself directly in front of the door, arms crossed. Karen stopped short, nearly running into him. She looked up at his stern face, then back at Judge Judy. For the first time since entering that courtroom, genuine fear flickered across Karen's face. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "You'll leave when I dismiss you. Sit down." The 2 women locked eyes. Karen's bravado crumbled. Her shoulders sagged. Tears began streaming down her face, real ones this time. Not the fake theatrical crying from before. She stumbled back to the defendant's table and collapsed into her chair, arms crossed tightly across her chest, mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. She looked like a child who had finally realized that actions have consequences. Judge Judy straightened the papers on her desk with deliberate slowness. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the rustle of each page. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I find for the plaintiff, Mrs. Margaret Chen." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks.
"In the amount of $5,000 for unpaid rent." Karen's head snapped up, mouth opening to protest.
Judge Judy's hand shot up. "I'm not finished." The courtroom went dead silent again. Karen's mouth closed. Judge Judy continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Plus $2,800 in property damages, which Mrs. Chen has meticulously documented with photographs, repair estimates, and contractor invoices." She paused, letting that sink in. "Plus court costs and filing fees?" Another pause. "Total judgment, $8,200. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karen made a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Margaret sat frozen, hardly daring to believe it was real. But Judge Judy wasn't done. Not even close. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on Karen with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. "Furthermore, Ms. Whitmore," Karen looked up, mascara-stained face full of dread, "your behavior today has been the most disrespectful, entitled, and contemptuous I have witnessed in 25 years on this bench." Judge Judy let each word land like a physical blow. "I'm ordering this judgment to be reported to all 3 major credit bureaus, which will remain on your credit report for the next 7 years." Karen's face went from red to white in an instant. "Additionally," Judge Judy continued, her voice cold as ice, "I am forwarding documentation of your conduct today to the California State Bar for potential criminal contempt charges. Your admission that you never intended to pay, Your repeated interruptions, your disrespect for this court, and your attempt to flee during active proceedings constitute contempt of court." The bailiff shifted slightly, hand near his cuffs. Karen looked like she might faint. Judge Judy leaned forward one final time. "You wanted to know what I could do? Now you know." For a moment nobody moved. Karen sat there, the full weight of the consequences crushing down on her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, shaking with disbelief. This will ruin me." She looked up at Judge Judy with desperate eyes, perhaps hoping for some last-minute mercy, some indication that this was all just a scare tactic. Judge Judy's face showed zero sympathy. Her voice was firm, final, and absolutely devastating. "You ruined yourself. I just made it official." Then Judge Judy did something she rarely did. She took her time, making sure Karen heard every single word. "Maybe next time you'll think before you treat good people like trash." Karen flinched. "Maybe next time you'll actually read what you sign instead of skimming and crying victim later." Another flinch. "Maybe next time you'll act like an adult instead of a spoiled child who thinks the world owes her everything." Judge Judy paused, letting the silence stretch out. Then with perfect timing she added one final line. "But I doubt it." Crack. The gavel came down with the force of finality. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Justice had been served. Karen sat completely frozen, tears streaming down her face, staring at nothing. Her whole body shook with silent sobs. The reality of what had just happened was finally hitting her. $8,000. Credit ruined for 7 years. Potential criminal charges. All of it on camera. Broadcast to millions. Her friend in the gallery had her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. Margaret Chen, in beautiful contrast, sat with her back straight, a peaceful smile on her face, tears of relief and vindication rolling down her cheeks. She looked 10 years younger. The weight of months of stress finally lifted from her shoulders. Then something extraordinary happened. One person in the audience started clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire gallery erupted in applause. This almost never happened in Judge Judy's courtroom. She typically maintained strict decorum. But this time, Judge Judy let it happen. She sat back, watching the standing ovation for Margaret, allowing the moment of collective satisfaction to wash over the room. The applause wasn't for her. It was for justice. It was for every person who had ever been taken advantage of by someone like Karen. The bailiff approached Karen's table. "Ma'am, we need to escort you out now." Karen stood on shaky legs, looking like she'd aged a decade in the last hour. As the bailiff gently guided her toward the exit, the camera caught her face in profile. Gone was the smirking entitlement. Gone was the defiant rage. In its place was something raw and real. The devastating realization that consequences are real, that Judge Judy doesn't bluff, and that the entire nation had just watched her humiliation. As the courtroom doors closed behind her, Karen Deborah Whitmore left as a viral cautionary tale. Margaret Chen remained seated, surrounded by well-wishers, finally vindicated after months of being gaslit and abused. And Judge Judy? She simply moved on to her next case because somewhere out there, another entitled person needed to learn the same hard lesson. If you're feeling absolutely satisfied right now, drop a comment below and tell me your favorite part of this epic shutdown. Was it the gavel slam? The bank statement reveal? Judge Judy's final speech? I want to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We bring you the best courtroom justice moments every single week. Hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell so you never miss when another Karen gets exactly what they deserve. Now let's see what happened after the cameras stopped rolling, because this story is far from over. Outside the courtroom, cameras caught Karen on her phone, already complaining. She was so unfair. I'm appealing this. A producer approached. Ms. Whitmore, any comments? Karen exploded. Judge Judy is a bully. I'm calling my lawyer. The producer calmly replied, You can't appeal. You signed an arbitration agreement. Karen's face went blank. What? No one told me. The producer smiled slightly. It was in the contract you signed to appear. Karen stormed off, still refusing to take any responsibility for her actions. Why does this story resonate with millions of people? Because we've all dealt with a Karen. The coworker who never takes responsibility for mistakes. The customer screaming at minimum wage workers over a coupon. The neighbor who blasts music at 2 a.m. because rules don't apply to them. Watching one finally face consequences feels like justice for every time they got away with it. Judge Judy has built a legendary 25-year career on shockingly simple principles. Read before you sign. Keep your word. Take responsibility for your actions. Respect the people around you and don't make excuses. These aren't complex legal theories requiring a law degree. They're basic human decency. But in today's world of endless victimhood and zero accountability, they've become revolutionary. Karen represents the entitlement epidemic sweeping our society. People who genuinely believe everything should be free, that consequences only apply to others, who weaponize victimhood as a shield, and who mistake kindness for weakness. Judge Judy's shutdown wasn't just about one woman. It was a message to everyone who acts this way. This doesn't work anymore. Not here, not in my courtroom. Margaret represents the silent majority. Good, hardworking people who play by the rules, who keep their word, and who get taken advantage of precisely because they're kind. Watching Margaret get vindicated gives hope to everyone who's ever been walked over by an entitled bully. Judge Judy's courtroom is really a classroom teaching millions about contracts, personal responsibility, respect, and consequences. This case will be watched for years. Parents will show it to entitled teenagers. Landlords will play it for problem tenants. HR departments will use it in workplace training. Replay that gavel slam in your mind. That sound represents justice delivered, excuses rejected, respect demanded, and accountability enforced. In 30 seconds, Judge Judy did what millions wish they could do. She shut down entitled behavior without yelling, using only facts, evidence, and calm authority. She proved you don't need to scream to have power. After 25 years and thousands of cases, Judge Judy remains the queen of daytime television. Why? Because she gives us what we desperately crave: fairness. In a world where the loudest voice often wins, where playing victim gets rewarded, where truth feels negotiable, Judge Judy's courtroom is different. Evidence matters. Truth matters. Behavior has consequences. Entitled people don't get special treatment. This wasn't just entertaining television. It was a cultural moment. A line drawn in the sand. A reminder that respect is non-negotiable. That kindness shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. That actions have real consequences, and that sometimes justice is served with one decisive gavel slam. Today, Karen still posts victim rants online, still blames everyone else. Her life harder because she never learned. Margaret is thriving, dignified, living proof that good people don't finish last. The universe balanced itself that day in Judge Judy's courtroom. If this story reminded you why Judge Judy is an absolute legend, do me a huge favor and smash that like button one more time. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the most entitled behavior you've ever witnessed? I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to hear your stories. And listen, if you love seeing justice served and entitled people getting the reality checks they deserve, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. We break down the most satisfying courtroom moments, karma stories, and justice being served that you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss when we post new content. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. That friend who constantly lets people walk all over them. Or hey, maybe even someone who could use a reality check themselves. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, be respectful, take responsibility for your actions, and never ever act like a Karen in Judge Judy's courtroom. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.